Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first ever High Fighters Creepypasta reading after 5 years of nothing. I can't promise that it's going to become a recurring thing, but I will try to get these out whenever I can from now on. Today's story I'm reading is a fairly new one, a lost episode story based off of one of, if not the most, iconic adult cartoon of all time. Today I bring you a South Park creepypasta titled Smiling Cherub. I will not be the patient voice that responds and wants to ask an immediate response in such a short time. If any South Park fans around here don't recognize this title as anything related to the show or anything specific, that's fine. Don't worry. It is better that you leave that title as a fleeting memory in your mind, and that's it. Continue with what you were doing and forget about me. However, if you have clicked on my post just to say sarcastically, "Hey you, what are you telling us?" make yourself comfortable, and your questions will be answered. For now, I'm just going to blurt out that what I'm going to say while you analyze and assimilate all of this information to the best of your ability. I think I have found a lost episode, or rather, an alternate episode of an episode of South Park. More specifically, the episode Asperger's, episode 8 of the 15th season of the show itself, whose duration consists of 18 of the 22 minutes the length of an average episode of the series. Now, I know I'll be called a troll, that I'm just looking for attention with conspiracies out of my ass and stuff like there's no such thing as that in the franchise, that the never aired episode trope because it's too extreme, foreboding, terrifying, satanic, or for being a professional breaker of the 4 to 5 walls of the thin barrier that separates our reality and fiction, traumatizing each and every one of the viewers who dare to turn on their television at the wrong time, also known as lost episode, is not going to work for them at all. It sounds stupid, too cliche. Don't worry, you have every right not to believe me. Seriously, I'd rather they didn't. I also don't think that something like this is managed, in some silly way or another, to materialize in this world. Much less based on something from a series like South Park that probably would have been shitted, mocked, and martyred brutally and honestly, in all and in each of these tales of childhood horror in every possible way. That is, if you count all the celebrities who have been severely lampooned in unimaginable ways within the pinnacles that the show has been holding for years and 1,000 times over. It really is stupid. If you think about it for a bit, that feature would already be a part of the show before we know it. But from here, I will assure you of one thing that is very clear. I know exactly what I have seen. And I do not know if what I have seen can be found elsewhere other than in my possession. I say this for the curious who dares to look for this information in the South Park forums. Don't. You will most likely get a 404 error page in the site's search engine. Also, don't bother contacting South Park Studios or some TV network like Comedy Central. I doubt they'll give you a convincing answer, if there is a logical answer in the first place. However, if you have doubts about all this and my story, do not hesitate for a second to ask me questions. I will do everything possible to answer them in time, while this post and my profile remain up until further notice. For now, I would like to provide a reasonable introduction to all of this, with an origin, background, and context. Before describing what this episode offers at first glance, it is important to settle 3 important questions. What is South Park? For those who have lived under a rock for 25 years, South Park is an adult animated series broadcast on Comedy Central from 1997 to the present day, made by animators and producers Trey Parker and Matt Stone. The show is about the misadventures and problems that 4 children between 8 and 10 years old get into in the fictional town of South Park respectively. The 4 of them spend their time getting involved in solving every problem that they have during the day-to-day of their lives, in one way or another, in the face of the complete idiocy that its most adult inhabitants have about it, with almost all 4th graders drinking that more mature role even sometimes dramatizing aspects that a normal child would have, but in a brutal way. The series is well known for having almost absolute freedom to parody or make fun of any social, political, ethnic, religious, scientific, moral, or artistic group that exists in our world, so much so that it has cost it some controversy and censorship during its years on public television. But that has not stopped it from reaping a lot of success and fame in what has been broadcast on the air. However, if the series remains current today, it is fundamentally because of its four main characters, which I will describe below. I'll start with the first one. Kyle is what we might consider the voice of reason in the main group. He is the most intelligent of his class and has a fairly stable amount of wisdom when facing any problem. He is Stan's best friend and is very attracted to his Jewish religion. However, he can easily enter into various moral conflicts against his person and knowledge, either because of what he believes or because of the events that happen around him, making him sometimes not aware that what he does is going in the direction of good or evil or outright irritable. Basically, Kyle is like the lead mentor of the four. Personally, I'll stick with Kenny. Kenny is often credited with being the last of his group and the most innocent of the four. In the entire show, there have been few times in which he has said a word because by wearing the hood of his coat most of the time, it is very difficult for the viewer to understand what he says, something that his friends do not. It's a problem because they somehow understand you most of the time. Unlike other characters in the show, Kenny belongs to a fairly low social status, reaching poverty, which has served as the subject of ridicule for a certain badass that I will mention later. However, the most characteristic of him is his immortality. Kenny is incapable of dying, and on the show, or at least in the early seasons, it was a recurring joke to see him die in all the most morbid ways possible, as if the show had taken on a deep hatred and grudge towards the specific character. It's a bizarre joke, but striking to this day. However, that has not stopped him from protecting and helping the people he loves and cares about so much, whether they are his friends or his family, literally sacrificing himself for them if necessary. I will leave him as the only one of the four to be pure of heart, the hero we all wish we had someday. Everything seems to be going well around here, but now it's my turn to talk about Cartman. Oh my god, Cartman. Where do I start with this little bastard? Imagine the worst person you have ever met in your life, be it a tyrant or someone who has made your life miserable and transformed him into a cartoon character. That's basically what Cartman is. All the controversies and black humor that the program has had has been almost always generated by this fat guy. He is everything that is currently frowned upon politically. He is a racist, spoiled brat, mocker, hypocrite, manipulator, sociopath, and Kyle's eternal rival. Even so, he is also the only one of the four who has solved or gotten out of trouble the most times, the people he cares about the most, and the crazy society in which he lives. Although in the end, it turns out that he does it for his own intentions, or you got to know what you really want. He is like a big box of chocolates. You don't know what is inside until you decide to open it, and you are surprised to see what it contains. It's a character that, in one way or another, was created for the purpose of making you hate him, only for you to grow fond of him eventually. He has quite a unique reputation, if I have to put it that way. I consider him the immovable force of the four. Okay, now it's my turn to talk about the last of the four, the pinnacle between morality and reality in the context of this series. Stan, in one way or another, is interesting. He's not the biggest of the four, but at the same time, he's not the most invisible either. I would consider it the middle ground of the show. Stan was always my favorite character on the entire show, as he was the only one I could at least identify with. He is the most mature of the group. He has enough reason to understand and judge what is right or wrong within the circumstances that happen around him. Although, because of his own mentality, his understanding of the world has led him to have many emotional conflicts during the course of the seasons, resulting in him developing psychological problems such as depression, alcoholism, and several attacks of rage and anger after his death, frustration, and problems that could happen to anyone. However, in one way or another, the show ignored this constant problem of his, focusing more on other social and legal aspects, rather than indefinitely covering his emotional and sincere problems. Of course, Stan didn't stop fighting for what was right or wrong. However, I still get that strange feeling of emptiness at not having addressed one of these issues again in him, which caused me a great deal of grief at the time, a change of perspective of what Stan really represented in the show. Honestly, I think that everyone who has seen the show will have at least identified with it, either voluntarily or non-voluntarily. It is difficult for me to classify it in terms of the show, but I will treat it as the moral balance of the four. What do you mean by alternate episode? Do you remember a small event that happened to one of the episodes of South Park, more specifically the episode OGs, episode 7 of season 20? Before it had that title, its original title was going to have the name of The Very First Gentleman, and its plot was going to be very different from what we know today, with Hillary Clinton winning the election and becoming the 45th President of America, as well as introducing Bill Clinton as America's first gentleman, hence the title. What was the problem? Trump won the election. Both Trey and Matt and their entire team had to work around the clock to revive, scrap, and change the entire plot of the episode in less than a week, transforming it into the episode OGs that we all know. Well, it seems that it is not the only episode of the series to have a different version than the one finally shown. Or at least, that is what I want to believe. It turns out that, amid all this jumble of projects and discarded scenes, there is an alternative version of another episode of which there's no information about it, whose only proof of its existence lies in the corner of my dresser. It is a version that differs a lot from its counterpart Asperger's, and by far, I mean that its development, presentation, synopsis, and message are more unique. You'll understand when I get to it.